What movie inspired Kyle Okposo on his way to win a Stanley Cup? We'll discuss this and more next on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, July 26th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at Monoman12, follow the show account on X and Instagram at @L_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. So, Panther fans, great to be back here once again to celebrate the Summer of Champions. Yes, once again, the Florida Panthers being Stanley Cup champions. And I'm having a boatload of fun this summer, once again, talking everything in relation to the Florida Panthers. And if you did not catch yesterday's episode of the show with myself and Francisco Laporta, make sure to check that out as we discuss more about the Florida Panthers origin story, about how they got their name. There's going to be another part of that conversation that will be released tomorrow on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, as this summer is going to be dedicated on storytelling. It's not really going to be X's and O's, breakdowns and everything. But when you win a Stanley Cup, it's really about telling the stories of people and also where they take the Stanley Cup, obviously. And we're going to do more of that on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But it is a Friday, which means it is a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. It's been a few weeks since we've had a Fairbanks Friday, but fresh off the IR here, and great to have him back. He is Nich Fairbanks. Nich, welcome back to the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me back. Still not 100% healthy, but you know what? Coach told me he needs somebody to go in and make a great effort, and I said, you know what? I feel well enough to do it. So here I am.
You're on the tail end, my friend, and great to see that you're back. More importantly here, but great to have you, dude. But let's talk about more of the days with the Cup. And Brandon Montour was the next guy for the Panthers to get his day with the Cup. We saw how the latest with the Cup being out in Saskatchewan. Now it's made its way back east for the last few days. Spent some time with Rick Dudley, which we'll get to a Rick Dudley story in segment number 2. But Brandon Montour got his day with the Cup out in his hometown of Ohsweken, Ontario, which is part of Ontario, which also has the Six Nations of the Grand River, which holds multiple Indigenous communities such as Mohawk, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, Seneca, and Tuscarora. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But Montour, being of the Mohawk Indigenous community, great to see that he brought the Cup back to that community. There was a picture that Philip Pritchard put of him in a jail cell with the Cup. Everyone was wearing white there too. Everyone was also. You saw pictures of kids eating cereal with it too. I believe it was cereal, but the big story for that too is just his love for lacrosse too. And there's also a picture of him in front of the Six Nations background too, with a stick, which was Florida Panthers themed, by the way. Cool, which was another thing for that. So seeing that, and also the relation of the two sports with how a lot of fans, who grow up in Canada especially, play both of the sports. What were your reactions when you saw Brandon Montour taking it back to his hometown?
First of all, Brandon always has and always will be a fun-loving person. It seems like, it was very important to him to take it back to, his roots and where he came from, and really wanted to show his community and, kind of share, kind of both worlds, from, the area that he's honestly from, and then from the area that he just came from. I'm not going to say Seattle, but like another world down here in South Florida. So, the jail cell thing. Brandon, I'm not going to wish this on you, but I hope you're in the sin bin a lot when Florida plays Seattle later this season. But other than that, it's a great thing to see that it's this gets to be shared with every community where the players are from, and that most people who would never get a chance to actually be in the Cup's presence.
Yeah, and just looking up the history of both the games of hockey and lacrosse. I mean, lacrosse came out was starting to form in 1100 AD, while hockey was starting to get itself together just a few hundred years later for them too. So crazy to think that how the growth of it too with that, and also Wayne Gretzky. I remember him just talking so much about it on Twitter too for him. And also, I'm gonna do a screen share real quick of the picture of Brandon Montour with the cup, and they're in Six Nations. So there it is, him grabbing the stick too there. But also, not only, but he wasn't just a lacrosse player; he was a star too. He played for the Six Nation Arrows between 2012 and 2014. He scored 42 goals in between that, and he won the Minto Cup. Some of the teammates that he had are playing in the PLL right now too. So that's another cool thing of him, of the talent. But also, we also got to think of the economics of lacrosse versus hockey. When you get the opportunity and you're drafted, what is the opportunity that you're going to take? I'm not going to say that he's a better lacrosse player than he is hockey. I've seen him play hundreds of hockey games versus I have not seen him play a single lacrosse game. But based on that resume, it speaks volumes on how you're able to transition from one sport to the other.
Most definitely. And, you see this a lot in baseball and football, where you have athletes that could play in the NFL or the MLB. And, a lot of them end up choosing the NFL just because of the payday. And, who can argue with that? If you are really good at your craft and you can get paid for it and set up your family for multiple generations, then why not? Just do what you can do to not only better your family, but also better your community at the same time. And, again, this kind of goes in line with him bringing the cup back to, the area that he's from in Ontario. So it's funny. I was actually watching lacrosse, the college finals earlier this year. It was actually the women's. I think it was Northwestern, and I forget the other team just because I'm from that area. And it takes a lot of patience, and it's grueling. I would probably say that hockey's probably my number one toughest sport, but then you have to put lacrosse there because it's just nothing but endurance and patience. So
yeah, and then you have the size of the size of a field is longer than a football field. It's 120 yards versus 100. So a lot more room to run.
And they don't even make it look like that either. It looks smaller to me when they run it.
Yeah, and also you have to have 3 sets of attack and defensemen back too. Offside rules are different. If your stick gets knocked out, obviously a lot of people yell yard sale. That's where a lot of that term came from. But if someone's stick is knocked out of their hand, it's not a slash. So if hockey fans, if you guys watch it and that happens, I promise it's a play on. You just continue to play too. But we're gonna transition over to segment number 2. We're gonna discuss more about Steven Lorentz's day with the cup, a Rick Dudley story too, from when he lifted the cup with the Florida Panthers, and Aaron Ekblad's continued banter with Brooks Koepka, a funny story there, and also his perspective on winning too. We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. And Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. And you could save up to 60% off buying tickets for sports, concert, comedy, theater, and more. With the zone deals, you can save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. All-in pricing, toggling this feature shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. And it's the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And once again, I'd like to thank you guys all for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. And a lot more to talk about here on in a jam-packed celebration once again of guys who are getting their days with the cup, and also 40 some odd miles away from where Brandon Montour took his day, the cup, was also Steven Lorentz, which, funny enough, I forgot to mention, game one of that first round series against Toronto. I remember all the goal scorers for the Panthers in that game were all from Ontario. Nick Cousins, Brandon Montour, Carter Verhaeghe. I forget which one the other one, but there was another one there for the Panthers there. But all four of them were from Ontario in that one. But Lorentz brought it to a hospital out in Kitchener, Ontario. Around the kids, you always see him with a smile on his face, as always. And I just remember Game 3 against the Tampa Bay Lightning when that fourth line created on the forecheck, got it back to the point, and then Brandon Montour scores with a screen in front too. So just an effort play, and then everyone was just talking about Steven Lorentz and just the all the hard work that he done to get there. And also a little bit of a story of our former co-host of this show, Josh, on his way to Edmonton. He got a chance to be next to the family of Steven Lorentz, and also spoke about why is he always smiling. And the parents said, because he's living his dream. So great story for Steven Lorentz there. But another story, Nick, was Rick Dudley, part of the organization for a long time. Patrick Hornquist actually grabbed him and say, hey, you're coming with me. So when Bill Zito was the first member of the front office to lift the cup, Rick Dudley was that very next person to have a chance to put his hands on it and lift it. So when you hear that, based on everything with that, how do you process that when you hear that story of Rick Dudley?
Number one, that Zito is very selfless and he's a team player. He understands, the people that make up his management group and how much they've had to put in their lives to even get to this point. As you mentioned, Dudley was with the Panthers in the early 2000s. He was part of, the J. Bo Meester, draft, trading down and everything. And, had some mixed results, then ended up, I think, going up to Atlanta after that and Carolina and so on and so forth. But, to finally kind of come home to Florida and everything and then be the second person from the front office to actually lift the cup shows that there is respect there and that Zito understands that, Dudley's put in his dues. He's done really good work, and, this is his reward for kind of sticking with it and not, I guess, quitting.
Yeah. So and going to different organizations too. Between that, also before that, he was with the Tampa Bay Lightning too. Right before. So bounced around different organizations, and then finally for him coming full circle right before that, and then great relationship with Don Waddell, as he went to multiple spots with not only Atlanta but in Carolina too. So great full circle moment for Rick Dudley there. But another conversation that I want to have here on the show is more about what Aaron Ekblad spoke about with with everything, with the parade to losing the Stanley Cup and then finally winning it. First of all, let's get to the funny part. First was we all know all the reaction that the internet had, especially when Aaron Ekblad brought the cone above his head and said the words "bleep you, Brooks Koepka," and I just had a good laugh. Obviously, there was some drinks in him, obviously, prior to that. But also, he spoke about that, how he heard that Brooks Koepka liked it. I don't know if he was ever going to confirm if they ever spoke about it. But there's a part of me that thinks that what if Aaron Ekblad texts them saying, "Hey, just a warning, I'm going to say this." What are the chances of that he did that?
Honestly, I really don't know. If anything, I'd probably slim to none. I think the whole incident with Brooks Koepka with the traffic cone in the game last year, he didn't give Ekblad a head up that, hey, he's going to grab a cone and do what he did. Ekblad didn't owe him anything to say what he said, and again, it's all in good fun. I mean, Aaron's on the better side of this now. He won a cup. He was a big part of it, and why not? Why not just like kind of go out that way and just like let it die now? And maybe I won't, because I'll be on Twitter for sure when he messes up, and I'll definitely be putting up that Brooks Koepka cone image. But it's just something nice between them two that, hey, listen, we can both have fun with this. It doesn't mean that much. We're just going to have some fun. But where it comes really is to the fans. If they're going to carry it on like me, or if they're going to be like, hey, listen, Aaron, you've already climbed the mountain or whatever, there's nothing more we need to talk about.
Yeah, I believe it's more like because they just want to see if we're going to make it more of a story than it actually is. And hey, it makes a good conversation point too. So I'm not going to be angry about that when you have something as big of a headline as that. But also, he spoke about the recovery, spoke about being on both ends of it. Obviously, with the end of 2023, it was really tough for him being in that sling, and then spoke about going to Sam Reinhart's wedding in a sling, and then across the venue is Jack Eichel there. Obviously, him being teammates with Sam Reinhart while they were in Buffalo, and having a good time, laughing. Obviously, in that summer, he's a Stanley Cup champion, and then this one is where you could tell it gets him real in the feels of when Jack Eichel said that they could have gone 2 more series after, even though they won the Stanley Cup there in 5 games against the Panthers. So really tough to swallow, obviously, when it comes to careers, and obviously just based on how Ekblad even answers questions, he takes these things to heart, just based on how I read them. But when you hear about that for Ekblad, it's great to see how this time around he even spoke about there's nicks and bruises, but not major surgeries for the Panthers going into this one.
Yeah, and I'll just say this, Jack, you're supposed to be an example, and hopefully you show some humility later in life, because you were part of that great ride for Vegas, but you never chopped down your enemy or somebody that you played. Games 1 and 2 could have gone either way, in my opinion. So, just grow up. Sorry. I'm just going to get that off my chest. Secondly, I think the fact that the Panthers kind of got out of the playoffs without any major injuries and major surgeries, things like that, and just nicks and bruises can bode well going into next season, because you always think about, champions coming off a championship season, and is there going to be that slow start because they're so tired and they haven't had the rest or whatever. The fact that they are not that beaten up, and that they're going to have this time to rest and everything, maybe 2 months. I'm not going to say it's more than enough, because personally, I don't know what it's like to play a full NHL season on top of going to the Cup back to back. So I can't say what their energy level's like, but I have to be happy with the fact that, hey, going into next season, they're going to be healthy, and we're going to see exactly, what this team's made of. If they're like, listen, you know what, Last year was fun. Why don't we do it again?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And hey, for we spoke about the chemistry that even someone like OEL and Forsling had even in the first 16 games. Thankfully for the Panthers, it's right from the start with them getting there, and there doesn't need to be those growing pains later, because remember when Aaron Ekblad and Montour came back, there was a little bit of that bad stretch of just trying to get back into the groove of how they want to play too. So let's also not forget that there was a little bit of a period there where there was some frustration there from us, especially 2 shutouts. Let's not forget 2 shutouts when they went on the West Coast back in December. So that was tough then. But hey, looking back at it, and now the result, all worth it for the Panthers. So and now this gives us a good opportunity to transition to segment number 3, where this one is definitely going to be a fun one to talk about, where Kyle Okposo was inspired by a movie in his pursuit of winning the Stanley Cup. What movie is that? We're going to discuss that more next on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and I love sports. I don't want the sports to stop sporting. And even though the playoffs have been done for over a month, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sporting like we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Third and final segment here on this Friday, July 26th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you were already spoiled by the movie that inspired Kyle Okposo to in his pursuit of the Stanley Cup. But spoke. Also partnered with Fanatics, which we'll get more into the partnership with Fanatics later on in this segment, but spoke about his story and just the wearing the number 8. The last time he won a championship of any kind was when he wore number 8. And then the mission of 17 years in his career. 6 years ago, he suffered a really bad concussion while he was with the Buffalo Sabres and questioned whether he should play hockey. But also spoke about how there was just one thing still missing from him, and it was the Stanley Cup too for him. And obviously, thankfully for him, getting that opportunity, and also the decision to put him back in the lineup after not playing in Game 6, putting him back. And also great decision by Maurice, reading the room, knowing that it could be his last. We still don't know at this moment in time, but the movie that inspired the series, at least Batman, is the series that truly inspires Kyle Okposo. And if you're watching this on the YouTube, you will see the green screen background here of the bat symbol with Batman looking at it. Spoke about how a lot of how he watched the 1989 film mostly with Jack Nicholson too. So great story there. And also, who knows if he's sitting in front of his TV or if he's cooking a meal and having it in the background. Is it something that he puts on the sleep timer right before his pregame nap? Hey, and still probably can reside start to finish too. But also starting with the Christian Bale Batman too. Batman Begins, Dark Knight Rises too, and how it changed from round to round too. Just about when you think about completing a mission. And Batman's mission throughout the 3 movies with Scarecrow, Joker, Two-Face, you name it for that series. But when you just think about the trials and tribulations there, and also for Okposo, not being in the playoffs for almost a decade. Man, is this such a great inspiration even if it's something fictional like Batman.
Yeah, and I think when you watch that video and kind of read up on the story and everything, you watch 1989 mostly, which to me is my favorite because, Michael Keaton's my Batman of my generation. And then he fast forwards it all the way to the final where he's watching Dark Knight Rises. And the scene that really, I guess, encapsulates what he went through was when Bane basically picks up Batman and says, I was wondering what would break first, your body or your soul or your body or your spirit or your body, whatever that was. And he said that was the defining moment because after having that major concussion, his spirit was broken and so was his body. But he didn't know which one was going to actually heal up. And thankfully, a couple months later, as the season was starting, he's starting to feel like himself. So looks like the body had to kind of respond first, kind of like in Batman, and then his spirit or his soul would definitely be there to back him up, or at least kind of bring everything to fruition. So beautiful story, kind of a really good way for Kyle to maybe possibly end his career. But let's just say I think he probably picked a great set of movies to get motivated.
And it's also really about how your body is affected by what's going on upstairs too. And if that is cured more and more, then it responds later on because of the fact that, hey, your body is consistently talking to you, whether you want to deny certain things, at least that in my personal experience with that too. But also the whole Fanatics deal with that, him telling his story, that's another part of something that he's going to be involved with, currently involved with, which he's part of an immersion program that involves education for athletes who are looking for off-field and post-career opportunities, which also involves NFL and NBA players too. And they went to the Mitchell and Ness headquarters. And he also spoke about designing a hoodie with his career numbers of 9, 21, and 8. He's also a guy who's very interested in reading business articles and books. He says he's a big fan of reading front office sports articles and sports business journal articles too. And also spoke about when he was considering starting to see maybe how close the end of his career was. And it's like when they were selecting the new leader of the NHLPA, obviously that was under the fallout of everything with Kyle Beach and Chicago and everything too. But also another cool story was him speaking with former NFL running back Todd Gurley on winning a championship too. So two champions, coming together, talking about their childhood dreams, and also Kyle Okposo talking about watching 30 years worth of Stanley Cup lifts too, and now him getting his chance to do so. So also the great crossing of the other sports too.
Yeah, I actually really liked the Gurley portion of the story just because, Gurley came up to him outside of that the business meeting that they're having with Fanatics. And, Gurley just asked him, what is it like to have the trophy or to win the trophy? And, he described how for 30 years, as you were saying, that's all he dreamed about. And, every time he saw the cup being lifted, it just gave him chills. And can only imagine how he felt when the cup was handed to him. It's I think it went from Bob to him. And it's something special, and there's nothing like it in any other sport, to be honest with you. I mean, you see the NFL trophy, the Vince Lombardi trophy being passed. It's cool. It's small. The NBA trophy. Listen, I'm not gonna try and fake this. I mean, it was awesome during the '90s because I'm a Bulls fan, but ever since then, it's been all right. Sorry, Heat fans, but the Stanley Cup definitely is the one, and it definitely sets the precedence of what championships mean, how hard they are to win, and secondly, just the glory afterwards of actually winning one.
Now that you mentioned that, I think every time a championship is won in a different sport, I'm going to take a closer look at the trophy ceremony to see if the if the production crew zooms in on every single person every time they pass the trophy. Obviously, there's not a skate around because they're not playing on ice. If they're on the gridiron, on the diamond, but I'm gonna be paying close attention more than ever now to see. I mean, the next championship that in the major sports that's coming up is baseball and the MLS Cup too. Those are the next two that are on the in this part of the year. But also one more thing about Kyle Okposo that he spoke about of whether whether winning the Stanley Cup has changed him personally in his life, and he said that no, it hasn't really changed him, but also spoke about how sometimes people can be more invested in how you do in your career than you do, even though your mission is to win the cup. And also when it comes to how people judge you as a human being and the identity of him being Kyle Okposo, the hockey player, and how he wants to he doesn't just want to stick to one identity too with that, which is so great to see. We're going to see him in a front office very soon. It's crazy funny mentioning this name too, Jeff Marek. Jeff Marek has also said in the past, you use hockey. Don't let hockey use you. And crazy the news with Jeff Marek and Sportsnet and everything. But that quote from him rings so true on just don't get into the sport just to play, and have a plan after the fact too. So the fact that Kyle Okposo is getting involved in that, and also being humble enough to say, no matter what, when I go home, my family's going to love me. I'm going to have a great community. Whether I win one, my kids are still going to see me come home and they're going to know me as dad.
Mm-hmm. And I think part of you needs to be the same, or at least it don't allow the success to change you, because you're still the same person, whether you win one or not. I think it's the outside world that changes their perception. You think of the greatest players in NHL history that haven't won a cup. Imagine how much more they would have been, notarized and all that, if they had won one. He's cemented his legacy as a cup winner, and he'll be able to utilize that in any conversation and anything that he wants to accomplish now, saying, hey, I did this for 30 years. I took a leap of faith to go with another team and fight with them and become a part of them to win a championship. And you know what? I think I can take the lessons that I learned from that season or from that short period of time and apply them to everything that I'm going to do going forward.
Yeah, and you think about for Kyle Okposo getting it in his last season. I mean, someone else who got it in their very last season in the NHL, Lanny McDonald in 1989 with the Calgary Flames. And then you think about other guys who might be judged from the outside world who haven't won a cup, like someone like Marcel Dion, Jerome McGinley, Pavel Bure too.
Mm-hmm.
You think about some of those guys of how they're judged, but hey, for them, their community, they still see them as their people, the people that see them on the daily too, for them. So love this for Kyle Okposo, and just for him, still having the mental fortitude to get through that concussion and still experience winning for him. So really, really happy for him, and the fact that he got that celebration with his family. But Nick, I want to thank you so much once again for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast as we continue talking about the Summer of Champions. Thank you once again for joining me, my friend. Tell everybody where they can follow you online, my friend.
It's great to be back, and Armando, thanks as always to have me on. Everybody, let's have a great summer. You guys can follow me on X at Prudential0. And, let's see what happens over the next week. I'm pretty sure there's going to be some exciting celebrations. And I think we heard maybe where the Cup's going next.
Yep. The Cup is going next to British Columbia, where Sam Reinhart will get his day with the Cup. So can't wait to talk about that with you guys all next week. But Nick, thank you so much, my friend. And I will see you next week, my friend.
See you next week.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Nich Fairbanks, and you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.